exposing the secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder. Bedtime story for sleep. Hello everyone. Today, we are going to expose the secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder. And you probably won't survive this if you imagine it too vividly. Picture yourself walking through a dimly lit room where jars of strange minerals glow in the firelight. Shelves creak under bamboo scrolls, and smoke curls from clay pots that hiss as though alive. The air smells sharp, acrid, half like incense and half like lightning trapped in a bottle. You stand there, watching old men in long robes grind crystals into powder, chanting formulas of immortality, never realizing they are mixing death itself. And as sparks snap from the furnace, you wonder how anyone survived it all. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now, because I love seeing this strange web of history stretch across the world. Now, let's embark on today's secret history journey together. You shuffle closer. Leaning over a clay bowl that trembles from the pounding pestle, the grains of saltpeter and charcoal flying like tiny meteors under the alchemist's hammer, he mutters that these elements might cleanse the body, extend life, or unlock the path to eternal youth. You might laugh at that because in your modern eyes the mixture looks less like medicine and more like a prank about to backfire. Yet in this moment, you feel the tension of history tightening. It's the way one slip of the hand could turn this quiet room into a furnace of unstoppable flame. The Chinese alchemists didn't know they were playing with the first explosive chemical recipe that would one day tear through castles, end dynasties, and redraw maps. They thought they were chasing immortality. But instead, they gave humanity its most destructive toy. The oddest part is how accidental it all was. You imagine someone coughing in the smoke, spilling too much sulfur into the mortar, the powder puffing up with a hiss like a snake uncoiling. Did they jump back in terror? Did they call it a demon's breath? Or a divine warning? Historians still debate whether the first ignition was in a furnace, a torch that leaned too close, or a curious spark from the fire. But you can almost hear the bang in your ears, smell the scorched wood, see the startled faces of men who had just made a potion they never meant to drink, and you standing there. Realize this is the hook of the story, a pursuit of eternal life turning into a substance that promised eternal death. It is so cinematic that your mind feels tricked. Was this really just an accident? Or was it destiny wrapped in sulfur and salt? The secrecy of alchemy meant few dared to write down the full recipes, yet scraps survive in old texts. They whisper instructions like riddles. Warning, mixing these three causes, smoke and flame. You almost laugh at the understatement. But then you think about how many worlds would burn because of that understatement, as the haze thickens in the workshop. You hear the alchemist's heart pounding in your own chest. He cannot know that gunpowder will escape China, that it will roar in Mongol invasions, shatter medieval silence in European castles, and echo across oceans until no continent is free from its thunder. He only knows that something unnatural has been born, something that eats the air and spits fire. In the flicker of oil lamps, you feel history tilt, one accident setting the stage for 1,000 wars, and yet there's almost comedy in it. Imagine working for years to find immortality, only to stumble on a formula that guarantees the exact opposite. You smile grimly, because this is the kind of twist you'd expect in a dark fable. Not in real laboratories with stone floors and bamboo shelves, but here you are walking into that fable, breathing its acrid smoke, watching the spark that begins a chain reaction through centuries. The secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder is not just chemistry, not just history. It is a mirror held up to human curiosity. You reach for eternity, and instead you set fire to the world. The irony is thick enough to taste, and you can't look away. Because this is not the kind of accident anyone forgets. You walk beyond the smoky chamber and find yourself stepping into the restless borders of Tong China, where caravans grind across desert tracks, and traders slip between tents with satchels of strange powders tied tight to their belts. The secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder is already escaping the laboratory, though no one yet understands the full danger. Soldiers gather in tea houses, whispering about a powder that burns hotter than firewood. Merchants brag about fireworks that blossom against the night sky, and smugglers hide small jars in bundles of silk. You move through the crowd and hear the low hum of curiosity mixed with fear, the kind of sound that swells before a storm. The irony is everywhere. What began as a pursuit of immortality is now currency, entertainment, and rumor all at once. The night sky above Chang'an glows with festivals where bursts of color rain down. Children laugh, and yet you know this laughter carries the echo of future cannons. The paradox grips you because you can see how easily delight turns into dread. The powder crosses borders not through conquest first, but through curiosity, as travelers carry it in their stories. A monk tells you of Buddhist rituals where firecrackers scatter demons. A soldier brags about arrows tipped with tiny packets of powder that explode in sparks mid-flight. You sense how rapidly tales of this substance are spreading, bending into myth the way all dangerous secrets do. And still the strangest part is how nobody notices the knife edge they are standing on. Fireworks light up the heavens. And you wonder if the people cheering realize they are celebrating the birth of a force that will later blast. Through fortress walls, the secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder no longer belongs to one workshop. It belongs to empires, hungry for advantage. As you wander deeper into border markets, you overhear traders debating whether this powder is best kept hidden or best sold to the highest bidder. Historians still debate whether its first military use was deliberate, or if frightened soldiers simply threw burning powder at their enemies in panic. You can imagine the chaos of such a moment, the explosion of smoke, the choking sulfur, the startled horses bolting as men shout prayers into the night. And in that chaos, you see the seed of something unstoppable taking root. What was an accident in a quiet room now becomes a rumor of power, too tempting to resist. One odd detail lingers in your mind. Records mention guards at the imperial palace who stuffed bamboo tubes with powder and shot them into the air to scare away spirits. The audience cheered, clapped, and laughed, not realizing these bamboo tubes were the first trembling ancestors of rockets and artillery. You hold that image, a crowd entertained by what will one day be weapons of mass destruction, and it feels like standing at the edge of a cliff without realizing it. Humanity is about to step forward, blindfolded, into an abyss it cannot climb out of. You follow the road westward, along the Silk Road's shifting sands, where camel caravans groan under loads of porcelain, spices, and secrets. In one tent, you hear Persians marveling at Chinese powders that can paint the sky. In another, you hear whispers of recipes carried in coded poems. You know that sooner or later, these whispers will ignite in other lands, turning curiosity into weaponry. You realize that the secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder is not just a Chinese tale, it is already becoming global. The thought makes your pulse quicken because you sense how fast empires will reshape themselves around this single accident. The night closes around you, filled with echoes of drums, lanterns swinging in the wind, and faint bangs of firecrackers testing the limits of sound. Children clap their hands, women smile, and soldiers pretend not to flinch at the blasts. You stand in the middle of it all, knowing what they don't, that centuries later these tiny pops will evolve into thunderous cannons that will flatten cities. It is almost unbearable, carrying foresight into a past that cannot see itself. The market's glow feels both joyful and sinister, a stage lit for a tragedy that has not yet been rehearsed. And so, you walk away from the border. Smoke trailing behind you, the powder hidden in baskets and barrels, the secret slipping like sand between fingers. What began as an accident now has a life of its own, a restless spirit drifting westward, eager to reveal its true power. You can only watch as it spreads, spark carrying the weight of empires. You drift now into the echoing halls of medieval chronicles, where scribes scratch ink across parchment, and travelers return from the east with tales that sound half like miracles and half like threats. The secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder has already crossed deserts and seas, and in the manuscripts of Arab scholars and the notebooks of European monks it takes on a shape that is both curious and terrifying. You lean over one candlelit desk where a writer describes fire lances used by warriors who could send burning darts through the air. or sparks dazzling the enemy, and their smoke thick enough to blind. You turn another page and see mention of rockets that screamed across the night sky like dragons unleashed. Though the writer adds with hesitation that such stories might be exaggerations, historians still debate whether these accounts were accurate reports or embellished myths born from fear. Yet either way, you can sense how the world is beginning to change. You imagine the first time a knight in Europe heard such a tale. He might have laughed, shaking his helmeted head, certain no powder could replace the steel of a sword. But somewhere inside, he must have felt the same shiver you feel now, that these rumors hinted at a future in which armor would be no shield. The monks who copied these stories likely did not grasp the enormity either. They simply recorded what sounded strange and marvelous, like travelers' tales of lands where the sun never set. Yet between their lines you hear the faint crack of future muskets and cannons. One odd detail comes from an Arab account describing how powder-filled grenades were sealed inside ceramic pots and hurled over fortress walls. You picture the defenders laughing at the clumsy throw until the pot shattered and the explosion rattled the very stones beneath their feet. The mixture of fear and awe that must have followed lingers in your mind, for it marks the moment when myth stepped onto the battlefield. The secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder had escaped its birthplace and now threatened to rewrite the logic of war. You walk through a medieval fair where performers demonstrate small fireworks, their sparks drawing cheers from children who tug at their parents' sleeves, begging for more. No one realizes that these harmless bursts are cousins to the weapons whispered about in royal courts. You watch the crowd and feel the same irony that haunted you in China, delight and dread entwined. An audience applauding the very force that will someday roar through their cities. You wonder if history is playing a cruel joke, giving humanity the ability to laugh at its own destruction before it arrives. Further west, you find Italian scholars scribbling formulas in Latin, struggling to interpret fragments of recipes. Some write that saltpeter has the power to release imprisoned air. Others argue it is a divine substance that harnesses heavenly fire. They argue in circles, but none can deny the thrill of discovery. Historians still debate whether these formulas came directly from China or through a chain of translations across Persia and the Arab world. But as you listen, you sense that the debate itself is irrelevant. The powder is already spreading, unstoppable. Reshaping minds as well as weapons, you pass a monastery where a friar demonstrates. It's a small cannon made from a hollowed log bound with iron. He stuffs powder inside, sets a flame to the fuse, and the explosion sends a stone flying across the courtyard. The monks gasp, some crossing themselves in terror, others rushing forward with wide eyes of wonder. You can almost feel the world tilting again, the moment when faith collides with chemistry. When the search for divine miracles meets the harsh reality of physics. The secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder has now been translated into European awe. And soon it will be translated into European ambition as the candles gutter low. You realize that medieval chronicles are not just records, they are warnings. They carry the sound of sparks from distant lands, sparks that will one day ignite the powder magazines of empires. You feel the tension building like a storm, knowing that every note copied by a monk, every whispered tale in a tavern, is a fuse inching toward a future no one can escape. You wake to the crackle of flames in another land, far from China, where a different set of alchemists grind powders under a hot sun. The secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder has now become a rumor threading through India and the Middle East, each region bending the story into its own mythology. You step into a dim stone chamber in Persia where scholars argue over sulfur's strange ability to breathe fire, their beards shimmering in lamplight as scrolls spread across the floor. One insists that saltpeter carries the essence of the stars. Another warns it is poison from the underworld. The air smells of smoke and ink, thick enough to make your eyes water. And you sense how dangerously close they are to repeating the accident that first startled their Chinese counterparts. The hook sinks deep because you know these men are about to unleash the same mistake. Yet they lean forward eagerly as though secrets themselves can be tamed. In India, you follow a story of temple rituals where powders were used to create bursts of flame during ceremonies meant to impress gods and kings. Imagine standing in a courtyard filled with chanting priests, their hands scattering powders into the fire, sparks leaping skyward while the crowd gasps in awe. It looks divine, almost magical, yet you cannot ignore the irony that this same display mirrors the birth of weapons. Historians still debate whether India discovered gunpowder independently, or whether traders carried recipes from China along hidden caravan routes. You listen to the chants, feeling the uncertainty hang like smoke. Is this parallel genius, or is this evidence of knowledge traveling faster than armies? One odd detail glimmers in the accounts from the Middle East. A chronicler describes soldiers tying powder into cloth bundles and hurling them with slings. The explosions startling camels so badly they stampeded through their own lines. You can see the dust rising, hear the panicked cries, and taste the bitterness of sulfur on your tongue. The secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder no longer belongs to a single empire. It has been adopted, twisted, misunderstood in new landscapes where desert winds carry sparks just as easily as silk. You travel with merchants along the Red Sea, their ships creaking as jars of powder are hidden under dates and frankincense. A sailor whispers that the powder can call lightning from the earth. Another swears it was stolen from demons. You watch the jars sway with the waves, each one a storm in waiting, and realize how fragile this moment is. All it would take is a single dropped lantern to turn the deck into an inferno. You clutch the railing, feeling both dread and awe. Because once again humanity carries fire it does not understand. In the bazaars of Damascus, you see fireworks light up the night. Bursts of red and green making children laugh, and elders mutter about omens. The delight feels innocent, yet your chest tightens because you know this is rehearsal for something darker. A single spark here is entertainment, but in a few centuries it will be the opening shot of cannon fire that decides wars. You stand still, listening to the crowd's cheer. And the sound chills you. It is the same cheer that will echo centuries later when armies celebrate their victories with salvos of gunpowder. The scholars you overhear argue endlessly. Some claim this powder is the path to divine knowledge, others insist it is the end of civilization. Their debates feel familiar, echoing across cultures. Is discovery a blessing or a curse? Historians still debate whether these regions improved on the formula or merely reinvented it. But you understand that the real truth doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that the accident has multiplied, each culture believing it holds a secret, when in fact they are all sharing the same dangerous fire as you leave the chamber. The lamps flickering behind you, the smell of charred wood clings to your clothes. The hook of this story is not just in the accident, but in the repetition of the accident. A loop humanity seems destined to repeat in every corner of the world. You cannot escape the thought that people will always grind powders, always seek immortality, always stumble into weapons they cannot control. The secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder has now become a global echo. And you feel the ground beneath your feet tremble as though the future itself is already exploding you. Move now into the heart of a battlefield, where dust rises from trampled earth and banners whip against the wind. The secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder has reached its moment of spectacle. Not in quiet workshops or temple courtyards, but in the roar of siege warfare. You stand among soldiers at Kaifeng, the Song capital, where the sky is bruised with smoke and the air quivers with panic. Imagine being one of those soldiers, spear in hand, shield heavy against your arm, and suddenly you hear a shriek unlike anything you have known. A bamboo tube erupts with sparks, arrows hiss through the night, trailing fire like comets. Grenades crash against wooden gates with bursts that shake your bones. The ground itself feels alive, and you know in your chest that this is no ordinary battle. This is the day when war itself changes its heartbeat. You crouch beside a trembling archer whose hands will not stay steady. He mutters about demons, about spirits, too angry to be contained. The powder, stuffed into clay pots, is hurled by catapults, and the explosions rattle towers until bricks rain down. Soldiers clutch their ears, horses rear in terror, and you smell sulfur so sharp it sears your throat. Historians still debate whether the first use of these weapons in Kaifeng was decisive or merely experimental. But standing here, you feel the terror firsthand. It doesn't matter if the explosions are small compared to modern shells. What matters is the way fear spreads faster than fire. You understand why chronicles describe soldiers running before the flames had even reached them. 1. Odd detail hides in the accounts. Records say defenders at Kaifeng use fire lances, spears tipped with tubes of gunpowder that spat flame and sometimes fired shards of porcelain or metal. You can see a line of warriors rushing forward with these terrifying weapons. Their faces lit by sudden blasts, the noise like a dragon's roar. You think of the irony: men who sought immortality have armed soldiers with weapons that feel like the breath of death itself. The secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder now stands exposed in the clearest form. An accident turned into a weapon that no one can ignore. The siege itself becomes theater. Fireballs arc across the sky. Castles glow orange in the haze, and terrified families hide under floorboards. You hear children whimper, mothers mutter prayers, and commanders shout in voices cracking with desperation. You imagine the silence after each explosion. That brief hollow pause before the next blast reminds everyone that nothing is safe. Standing there, you realize the hook of this moment is not just the destruction, but the psychological shock. Even if the walls hold, the idea of invincibility has already crumbled. You walk among the soldiers after the smoke clears. Their armor streaked with soot, their eyes wide as though they have seen the end of the world. They whisper to each other that war will never be the same. Some say the powder is divine punishment, others insist it is proof of human genius. But all agree that once it has been used, it cannot be forgotten. The secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder has crossed another threshold. What was once a curious accident has become a permanent presence on the battlefield. You pass the wreckage of a collapsed tower. Its beams splintered, the stones still warm from fire. The smell clings to you, and the silence feels heavier than the noise. You can sense that empires watching from afar will rush to copy what they have seen, and the world will soon be flooded with experiments, weapons, and new forms of terror. You look up at the sky, smoke blotting the stars, and wonder if anyone alive in that moment realized they were standing at the pivot of history, and so the siege ends. Not with a single decisive blast, but with the memory of endless fire. You carry that memory as you step away from Kaifeng, knowing it will ripple outward across dynasties and continents. The secret has left the hands of alchemists, and now belongs to generals. It is no longer hidden in scrolls, or whispered in temples. It is written into the earth itself, carved in smoke and stone. And you cannot shake the feeling that the world has been permanently scorched. You slip into the echo of a council chamber where oil lamps flicker and voices clash like blades. The secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder has already leaped from the battlefield into the arguments of kings, priests, and scholars who cannot decide whether they are staring at a divine miracle or a curse born in smoke. Imagine yourself seated at the edge of a long wooden table, the surface scarred by knives and ink stains. As an emperor leans forward with burning eyes, he demands to know if this black powder will secure his throne or summon ruin upon his soul. Across from him, a scholar raises trembling hands to insist it is heresy, a tool of demons. The silence that follows is heavier than the weapons themselves, and you feel your chest tighten with the tension of decisions that will shape centuries. The hook here is irresistible. You watch powerful men squabble over a discovery they can neither control nor ignore. One argues that fireworks should be used only in festivals to honor the heavens, while another insists they must be transformed into weapons before enemies strike first. The air grows hotter as voices rise, and you smell the faint trace of sulfur drifting from a brazier in the corner, as though the powder itself is listening to their debate. Historians still debate whether early Chinese rulers saw gunpowder as primarily ceremonial or military, but you see clearly that the line between celebration and destruction is already dissolving. An odd detail surfaces in these heated discussions. A record tells of a Taoist monk who warned the emperor that mixing such powders offended the balance of nature, claiming it might shorten the ruler's life rather than extend it. You imagine the emperor's face hardening, the hall going quiet. courtiers shifting uneasily as the warning lingers in the air. Yet only hours later, another advisor praises the powder as proof of the empire's destiny, a sign that the mandate of heaven had chosen this ruler to command both fire and sky. You realize then that the real explosion is not on the battlefield, but in the minds of those who seek to claim ownership of the secret. You drift now into a cathedral in Europe where priests mutter about thunder that can be summoned from Earth. The secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder has crossed not only geography, but theology. And you hear the nervous laughter of bishops who argue whether this black substance is God's tool or Satan's trick. In the shadows, merchants whisper about selling it to kings, their eyes gleaming with the hunger of profit. You feel the air quiver with irony. An accident made in search of immortality is now judged as either divine blessing or infernal curse. And neither side is fully wrong. One evening, you witness a demonstration for a royal court. A cannon belches smoke across a field, the roar louder than thunder. The stone shot smashing into a wall with a crack that silences everyone. The king's face glows with delight while his advisors shift uneasily, their prayers drowned in the echo of destruction. You watch as he claps his hands and declares that heaven itself has delivered him victory in advance. The hook tightens further because you know that behind the smile is a truth no one dares to admit. Once unleashed, this power cannot be recalled, no matter what holy words are spoken. The debates rage on. Some rulers commission more cannons, others ban the powder outright, claiming it tempts fate. Historians still debate whether fear slowed its spread in certain courts or whether greed ensured it reached every corner of the world anyway. As you listen, you feel the futility of it all. The powder has already chosen its path, and no decree can cage it. The secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder has become a mirror reflecting humanity's endless hunger for control, a hunger that grows louder than conscience. You leave the chamber and step into the cool night. The stars are veiled by smoke from test shots fired earlier in the day, and the silence seems almost fragile, as though the sky itself has grown weary of arguments. You realize the greatest weapon is not the powder, but the debate it ignites. Because every argument sharpens ambition, every hesitation fuels curiosity, every decision writes new scars into history. You walk away, the echo of those voices following you, knowing that empires are already reshaping themselves around a mistake no one ever meant to make. You stand now on the deck of a ship, rocking against Atlantic waves, the sails swollen with wind, and the future heavy in every creak of the wood. The secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder has finally crossed oceans, carried in barrels sealed with wax and guarded like treasure. Picture yourself leaning over the rail as cannons line the deck, their mouths black and patient, ready to speak with fire at the first command. The sailors whisper nervously, their faces lit by lanterns that sway like watchful eyes. You know what they don't? These weapons will redraw the borders of the world, turning sea battles into thunderous contests where empires rise and sink in smoke. The hook is sharp here because you can see the entire age of exploration resting on an accident of alchemy. And you feel the weight of continents trembling beneath that revelation. When the first cannon roars across the ocean, sound is not just noise but prophecy. Villages on foreign shores crumble, fortresses tremble, and entire civilizations pause in shock. The secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder has become a force that erases distances. Replacing old weapons with storms of iron, you watch European powers clutch this discovery like a crown jewel. Their monarchs smiling as maps expand, their generals boasting of divine favor, while cannons roar approval. Yet beneath the triumph, you feel a chill. Because every blast also carries the echo of what was lost. The laughter of families silenced. The steady beat of old cultures swallowed by thunder. One odd detail slips from a Spanish chronicle. An explorer bragged that natives fell to their knees in fear of the cannon's roar, believing gods had arrived. You picture the scene, the smoke hanging thick over jungle trees, the acrid stench curling into the sky, and the silence that follows, heavy and unreal. It was not just a weapon, but theater, a performance of terror. Historians still debate whether this psychological shock mattered more than the physical destruction. Yet standing here, you sense they are inseparable. The secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder had become not only a weapon, but a stage trick that bent entire nations into submission. You follow the journey into the 19th century, where factories churn out shells by the thousands, the rhythm of machines echoing the heartbeat of conquest. The smoke of battle now clogs industrial cities, and the one small spark of an alchemist's furnace has grown into a storm-swallowing continents. You walk among workers with soot-streaked faces, their hands raw from packing powder, their eyes dull from repetition. They do not think of immortality or alchemy. They think only of wages and survival. And yet every package they seal carries the weight of history, proof that an ancient accident has become the engine of empires. The 20th century dawns with a thunderclap. Trenches snake across Europe, shells howl through the night, and the ground shakes until it feels alive with hunger. You crouch beside soldiers who flinch at every boom, their nerves shredded, their dreams haunted by the constant roar. The secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder has reached its darkest chorus. A symphony of destruction that no one can silence. You taste the bitterness of gas in the air. Hear the sobs of men who know the world has changed forever, and you cannot look away. Historians still debate whether humanity could have chosen differently, whether restraint was possible. But as you stand in that mud, you know the fuse was lit centuries earlier in a smoky workshop, and now you return to the present. The skies calm above you, the echoes fading. You hold in your mind the strange irony that one search for eternal life gave humanity the power to end itself. The secret of how Chinese alchemists accidentally invented gunpowder is not just a tale of chemistry. It is a mirror of human desire, ambition, and blindness. You feel the lesson cut deep. The greatest changes in history often begin not with intent, but with accident. And those accidents carry consequences too vast to imagine. You close your eyes, letting the smoke of centuries drift away, leaving only the heavy truth that curiosity can be as dangerous as any weapon. And now, as the pace slows, imagine yourself resting by a quiet river where the water glimmers under soft moonlight. The roar of cannons fades into the gentle lapping of waves, the acrid smell of sulfur replaced by the sweetness of night air. You breathe slowly, deeply, and let the tension fall from your shoulders. The secret no longer feels heavy, it dissolves into mist, leaving you with calm instead of fear. Every sound softens, every image blurs, until the story becomes a dream you can set aside. History has run its course. The sparks are gone, and only silence remains, wrapping you in warmth and rest. End of script. Wishing you much joy and health.